I want to thank you for coming in and getting us all jazzed up and following up Renee's pitch. And as always, as ever, Congressman, thank you. Now, hand it off to Rod Dierdon, and let me ask you, because I know the answer to this question. When we defeat Measure D and this RTC begins to move forward with a rail plan, I know you're going to help us all to heck, right? Bring those federal monies here.
And that's exactly it. And I appreciate you saying that. And that basically, that is our job as the federal representative, to make sure that the funding is there for the infrastructure that the locals have decided on.
Thank you.
And so that vote is a big vote, obviously, coming up here. But obviously, I look forward to playing my part, if I'm so honored to be in this position, to make sure that those infrastructure dollars, those federal funding dollars, are there. But look, it starts with you. It starts with people like Rod Dierdon, who understands how important it is to ensure that we have the infrastructure that allows us to live and work here in this area. So, knowing that there's someone like Rod on the call, I'm humbled to be a part of this call because of everything that he's done for our community, and obviously being on this call, he's continuing to be involved. And so it's my real privilege. And I'm sorry I got to go. My wife's flying into Washington, so I get to go pick her up. But on that note, it's my privilege to turn it over to Rod Dierdon Sr. And let him talk to the Mid-County Dems. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Congressman. Be safe. Rod Dierdon, I'm so happy to have you here, and I'm going to give you a short introduction. You were from 93 to 2014 the executive director of the Mineta Transportation Institute, Transportation Policy Research Center, created in 1991 by Congress. But going way back, you received a BS in accounting and a Master of Business Analytics in statistics in '63, but also served 2 combat tours as a naval officer in Vietnam. All of that before your rich experience in transportation, past chair of the American Public Transportation Association. How many terms in 1971?
5.
The youngest person ever elected to Saratoga City Council, and on and on. But your real legacy, I think, is the work in public transportation and rail transportation. And you're here tonight to share with us this important, vital, essential information, I think, when it comes to how we move forward into the future with regards to transportation, fighting climate change, energy efficiency, and all the rest. And so I just am so grateful for you to come here, and feel free to fill in any missing high points of your incredible career, please.
Barry, you've done just fine, and thank you very much. And I'd like to say hi to Renee and Suzanne, who are old friends from prior lifetimes. And of course, Jimmy. I don't know Jimmy as well as I know his dad.
Yeah.
At 83 years of age, he and I were peers, while Jimmy is more the age of my son. So that is a little bit of a disconnect there. I'm going to try to go quickly because we don't want to take you until midnight. But what I'd like to do is remind you that we are in a climate change crisis, that rail transportation is the most efficient, both in terms of cost of operation, but also in terms of sustainability, in terms of climate change, the most efficient mode of transportation known to humankind, other than walking and biking. But in terms of mass transportation, there is nothing that can come near rail transportation, especially electrically powered rail transportation, which is what we're looking for ultimately in your corridor. So I'm going to focus a little on climate change and run through real quickly something that will make you pay attention to the fact that we should never lose an opportunity to fight that battle. And then I'll end with a comment on Measure D. So if we could go to the PowerPoint, please.
Second. I've got to just line it up here.
There we go.
And just tell me when to advance, Rod.
All right. Let's go to the first slide. We've had 5 mass extinctions in the world, and Dr. Shapiro, a lady who is the director of, she chairs the biology department of Stanford Medical Center, and she's one of the most noted biologists in the world, gave a speech recently to the San Jose Rotary Club. And in it, she began by saying, we are in the 6th mass extinction. We have begun the 6th mass extinction. So, you know, the last one was 66 million years ago. It took us a little while to evolve what we have now. If we want to start all over again, well, we're going in the right direction. But if we want a future for people that look like you and mammals, then we better do some very rapid changing. And I'll walk you through that now. All of what you're going to hear, all of what you're going to hear today is science that has been confirmed by double peer reviews and is factual. At the end, I'll give you the references and you can follow up yourself, but it is absolutely factual. Next, please. Climate change is happening. It's caused by human beings. Some of the impact is already irreversible. If we act today, we still have an opportunity for warm-blooded critters to be sustained on Earth. If we don't act today, we are lost. Now, next, please. That statement was verified by 99.9% of the scientists in the world. There's still 0.1% out there that are paid by the oil companies, and they're coming out with confusing data. But all of the Nobel laureates and the scientific community agrees with what I just told you. 11,000 of the top scientists, all the living Nobel laureates, have signed a climate emergency declaration asking the world's nations to declare a code red in terms of climate change and to begin acting on an emergency basis to try to reverse this trend. Next, please. Just so you all know it and can answer the questions if you're asked. And by the way, you can have this PowerPoint and present it at your local home and school clubs or scouts or city councils or chambers of commerce or whatever. Please do use it. But the way climate change occurs is that energy comes from the sun, it hits the earth, and in the past, most of it's bounced back out into the atmosphere, into the universe. But now, because there's a blanket of CO2 and other gases that's surrounding the earth, and that blanket is thickening rapidly, the energy is coming from the sun, hitting the earth, and bouncing off and hitting the inside of that blanket and bouncing back down to earth. That recycling of the heat is cooking the planet. There's no other way of putting it. We're cooking our home. Next, please. That's a quote you can use if you'd like. Somebody caught it who was preparing this. Next, please. This is very important. There's a scientific group down on the Antarctic on top of an ice shield that's 5 miles thick. They bored down through that ice shield and they have checked the little tiny bubbles in the layers of ice going back 800,000 years. Now, those 4 countries, Russia, the United States, China, and the European community, don't usually agree even on the time of day, but they agree on this research. And you can see the ice ages, and you can see the warming periods and the ice ages and warming periods all the way across over to where we are now. And then you see the red arrow that's off the charts at the top. That is 4 times the average carbon in the atmosphere as any time in the last 800,000 years. It's twice the highest point, the peak period in the last 800,000 years. Well, what's that causing? Next, please. Carbon in the atmosphere is causing the recycling effect of climate change. And you can see that it really took off in the mid-1990s as we came back from the Second World War, and we began relying heavily upon petroleum power to move our cars, run our agricultural equipment, run our lawnmowers and leaf blowers and everything you can imagine. And so the heat in the atmosphere is what you see on the right-hand side of that chart. So the last 6 years were the hottest 6 years in the recorded history of our planet. That's got to be telling us something. And it's not just a little bit hotter, it's going up very rapidly, as you can attest by the forest fires and the other kinds of problems we're having. Next, please. Okay, we've got CO2 in the atmosphere. The CO2 is causing heat. Where is it coming from? CO2 is coming primarily from cars. We don't have to be told that when we light off 40,000 vehicles each morning in California, buses, trains, planes, trucks, lawnmowers, leaf blowers, and all the other petroleum-powered devices, we don't have to be told that it's causing huge amounts of pollution in the atmosphere. Well, that's 38, almost 40%. Industry, we can't really reach. Government has to reach the industry, but we can totally handle electric generation and imports. So that's together, that's 60% of the problem. And if we don't handle that 60%, we're not going to get there. No matter, we can look down at agriculture. The cows over in Central Valley are making methane. They're burping or whatever it is that they're doing over there. And so we've got to teach those cows not to burp. Well, don't forget it. We ought to all eat better and not eat as much cow meat and all of the other things that are down at the bottom. But if we do all of those things, we're not going to get there. If we don't do the transportation and energy side of it. Next, please.
Next slide.
Next, please. Yes, please.
Yeah.
Now that's the solution. Cars, air, and buses are awful. In terms of carbon per seat mile, that's what's killing us. That is what is killing our future for our babies. The solutions are on the left-hand side. High-speed rail, electrically powered light rail, commuter rail. And by the way, most of the buses that are being purchased now are electrically powered. So that bus column is going to be coming down unless you have an old fleet. Of course, electric cars are wonderful too. Next, please. So we already know what's happening. I'll skim through these because I don't need to dwell on them. Food production in the central part of the world around the equator is stopping. It's being desertified, and the ability to raise food for your family or raise food for export is being eliminated. The result is that masses of people are leaving those areas. The governments are no longer viable, and so they can't sustain their people. The people are leaving, and they're piling up against a dumb fence in the south part of the United States and dying and being treated inhumanely, when we need those people in the United States because we don't have enough people to employ. And the same thing is happening in Europe. They're drowning in the Mediterranean, trying to get out of North Africa. And the reason why that mass migration is occurring is because they can't produce food, and their governments are no longer viable along the equator around the world. Pandemics, I'm not going to talk about. That's you understand that. Water shortages, water shortages, water is going to be the most valuable asset on Earth. It is already more valuable on a per volume basis in the stores than oil. And it should be. Oil is toxic. And so we've got to figure out a way to protect our water. You can't do that if we have climate change, because the water, the water evaporates from a much hotter ocean much more rapidly. And that warmer ocean water then turns into vapor. It goes up into the clouds with much more pressure behind it. Those clouds are then not gently pushed over to the beach, but they're pushed over with hurricane winds. They hit the beach, and the land is much warmer, so that instead of the precipitation falling in snow and being retained for water for the summer periods, it runs right off, causing floods, and then leaving the summers dry and subject to fires and floods and droughts. And that's the next issue. And of course, the polar ice caps are melting. We're told now that the northern polar ice cap is going to melt. There's no way of protecting it. It's going to be gone. And if we lose the northern ice cap, the Greenland ice shield, and the South Pole, the water will go up between 100 and 200 feet in the oceans throughout the world. That means you folks are going to have to learn to swim. And that's scary. That's just a terrible thing. So we've got to stop it. We've got to reverse it now. And that is going to require intergovernmental courage throughout the world that has not been shown so far, but must be shown now. Yeah. Next, please. This is the key point. 2018, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change for the United Nations came back, and that panel had 72 Nobel laureates on it, by the way, came back with their benchmark study, and it said that we may have as little as 12 years left before the major issues of climate change would become irreversible forever. And it would only get worse after 12 years. They did a Czech study in preparation for the summit recently in Scotland, and found that climate change was occurring faster than expected, and that they expected that point of no return to be somewhere around 2030. And that we needed to do all we could throughout the world between now and 2030 to push that date away, off into the future, by making remedial action. Next, please. This is what I just told you, only it's in a bar graph now, or in a chart now. The green line is what if we make the 2030 deadline, then we can continue to live. It's not as comfortable as we've been, but our children will be able to have a living on into perpetuity. If we don't make the changes now by 2030, then we're on the red line. And that red line is to oblivion. Next, please. Here's Hal Harvey, an old friend from up at Stanford, and he tells us the way forward. He's an expert on energy. Next, please. We had to transform the power grid completely over to electric energy. Electrify everything. No more natural gas, no more petroleum for cars, no more wood-burning stoves in America, but also throughout the world. And we've got to do it as quickly as we can possibly do it. Transportation, of course, is the very most serious issue, because that's where most of the pollution is coming from. And we need to do that at a very rapid pace. Next, please. Now let's get to where you guys are. High-speed rail is going to come to the county, and it is going to. By the way, did you see the poll from UC Berkeley, an objective pollster? It said 56% of the voters in the state of California supported the high-speed rail project, supported the completion high-speed rail project, while only 35% opposed. The rest were undecided. In our area, in Northern California, it's 65% in favor with only 20% opposed. So it's a very popular project. And this was a brand new poll, just came out and done by the best researchers in the world. And so it's going to be done. It's almost done in the Central Valley. We're negotiating for the funding now to bring it from the Central Valley under the Pacheco Pass and tunnels and into Gilroy, up through San Jose, whatever that station is called, and over to San Francisco. And that is important for you folks here, because the Gilroy station will become a major interchange point for the rail systems coming in from Hollister and from Monterey and from Santa Cruz, maybe. Rail systems coming in from Hollister, that's committed. They're working on it. Rail system coming in from Monterey, TAMC is working on it. They're committed to it. The rail systems coming in from Santa Cruz has been working on it, committed in law now, but that's about to be challenged. And that's why I'm here for the rest of my presentation. If you really believe that you want to have a life for your kids coming up, then you want to put every person you can take off of the freeways onto a mass transportation system that is electrically powered. Because we're not going to see all of the old clunkers, even if we begin buying only electric vehicles by 2030, which is the governor's objective, tough one. You're going to have the old petroleum-powered vehicles on the road for the next 40 years. We don't want that, but there's no way in the world to take the vehicles away from the people that own them now. So we need to have alternatives to those vehicles that will allow people to use their electric cars on the freeways, if they can fit on the freeways, but have an alternative to ride mass transportation conveniently, safely, and sustainably from throughout your beautiful county down to Watsonville and on over to the main line of the Union Pacific Railroad at Gilroy, where you can then hop on high-speed rail and be in LA in less than 3 hours. You can be in San Francisco in less than an hour. And what's wrong with that? That's what the rest of the world does. Right. All we need to accomplish here is courage, the courage and forethought to get it done. And I'll talk about cost if you want to talk about cost in the questions, but I want to save the rest of the time. But I want to end my comment by noting that back in the early 1900s, a false corporation called the National City Lines was created by Standard Oil, General Motors, Firestone Tire and Rubber Company, and a couple of other automobile-related industries. They then went around the United States buying up the rail lines, the trolley lines, the commuter rail lines, and so on, and turning those right-of-ways over to the cities that then paved them over and bought buses and put cars. Of course, that made Standard Oil and General Motors very happy, and eliminated the rail competition. What's happening to you now with Measure D is very similar to that. You have some very wealthy people who have automobile-related businesses who are putting that money into a campaign to eliminate the opportunity for you to ever have a rail line in the future. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you with great certitude that there has never been a rail line that was purchased for so-called rail bikes to rails to trails, I guess it is. There has never been one that has ever been turned back to rails. Once the rails are torn up and sold and scrapped, and they're very valuable, by the way. That's high grade steel, very expensive. Once they're torn up and the bike or path takes over, that's the end of the rail. It never comes back. So if Measure D goes into effect, believe it, this is the end of your rail system in Santa Cruz County. And anyone that tells you otherwise is lying to you. So let me terminate my comment there and let you know that I'm happy to answer questions. And I'm really rooting for you in terms of protecting your opportunity to be sustainable in the future.
Thank you, Rod. You had a few more slides, but
I think I'll hold those off because they don't apply as well.
Okay,
I'll just save the time, Barry.
Well, I love that you're showing this map, and when I speak to the public, very few people really appreciate how connected we are by rail, and naturally they haven't seen the rail line used for what it could be used for, and so but they're surprised to know that it connects. For example, at Watsonville Station in Pajaro, they're surprised that there's freight activity there now. And what we'll be able to share with people, I think we can take some questions and then maybe permit Christina to show us a little bit about, she sent some slides to tell us about what's going on regionally. So would you prefer we take questions or let her present?
Well, they might be on a different subject than Christina. I respect Christina and have great affection for her. She's one of my students in a prior lifetime.
Okay, I'm hoping she'll hang in here. I'm a big fan, and I think she's a big fan of what we're trying to do here too. So let's go ahead and look for. I think we had. I'm going to stop the screen share so I can see the ordinary view for myself. And I'm looking in chat, and I think we're going to ask Mark Johannesson, the co-chair, to maybe field some questions. Gigi, and some of this is local questions. Like I wouldn't expect you to know about the cost of upgrading the trestles, but I have information on that. You know,
I can tell you that there's some cost involved.
Yeah.
But you know, Jimmy just told us that they created $55 billion in the Build Back Better bill that's been passed by Congress. Mm-hmm. They had $66 billion in the intergovernmental bipartisan infrastructure bill that is set aside for rail transportation.
Yeah,
those are grants that you're going to get because Jimmy's tough enough to get them for you. And if you can get those grants and rebuild the bridges and the rail and so on, why not do it? You know, if you're not going to save money by turning it down, it's going to go to somebody else. So get those funds, put them into your transportation system, but the money's there.
Yeah, I thank you for that answer. And that one resonates with a lot of people. They don't appreciate that if they don't, that they're already paying into a system that would pay for so much of this. And if we don't build, we don't get that money back. It goes somewhere else.
That's exactly right.
I have Jenny asking a question, asking for a sense of, what's your sense of the value of the 32 miles of track or of this corridor? And she goes on to say, the public needs to know what they would be throwing away if they vote for D. And maybe that's another way of asking, is the value of the line the steel and the ties, or is it the corridor and that and the permissions that we have to operate? You know, it's already a railroad. How hard would that be to build from scratch?
It would be impossible. Well, let's say it's not quite impossible, but it's highly, highly improbable, and it's never happened. Yeah. I guess the best test is, has it ever happened? There have been hundreds and hundreds of rail lines abandoned in the United States to become trails or highways or whatever. They've never been reestablished as rail lines, none of them. And so to be told that you could do that is a lie. It's a falsehood. And the value to you in your population center is not in the rails and ties and so on. It's in the future system. It's in a electrically powered light rail system or a light trolley system, all of which you could buy off the shelf and operate on that line completely quiet. There's no fumes and things, and you could operate it sustainably on that line wonderfully. But you have to own it.
Yeah, thank you. I think you might know Donna Murillo. She has this question: can you speak about the alternative that others bring up? Like, why don't we just widen the highways?
Well, Donna, I know very well. She used to be my assistant at the Minetta Transportation Institute, and she is one smart cookie, let me tell you. And the point is, that's a softball, by the way, if you haven't met it. The highway is never going to serve you. You got 4 lanes, 6 lanes in some places on Highway 1 now, and even with that, it's stop-start in some occasions. It's only going to get worse. You're going to have an 8-lane freeway. You want an 8-lane freeway on Highway 101, and that will still be overcrowded. And then you won't have any alternatives, because once you get to that width, you can't expand it anymore because you're into people's backyards and so on. So the freeway isn't going to be able to handle, even if you should do it with the freeway, isn't going to be able to handle your transportation requirements. That rail system with an electrically powered, quiet, sustainable trolley on it will handle as much as the freeway, and handle it cleanly with no interference with your population. And then the people who really feel they have to have a car can get out on the long parking lot that you're going to be calling your freeway in the future.
Yeah, thanks. I have another question, which is, would we need a different kind of rail to have light rail? And I can answer that. Essentially, we have standard gauge track here. We would modernize that. It would run a light rail or a freight train or the Coast Futura like we just demonstrated. Is that right?
Barry, you're absolutely right. You could, on those tracks, although you'd want to strengthen them and upgrade the bridges and probably replace a lot of the ties, you would be able to run light rail. You could run the freight. If the Santa Clara County buys the old Permanente quarry over on our side of the hill and puts it out of business, there's going to be huge pressure to see Davenport reestablished as a cement factory. Well, that's great. Puts people to work and so on. But then you're going to have a rail line to get the product out of there. So you'd have that opportunity still. And then, of course, you can bring excursion trains in too, along the tracks, and park them down there at the boardwalk and have your Suntan Special reestablished.
Yeah, we've got a question in chat that David Van Brink offers. He calls it a potentially delicate question, but I think it's a valid question. Should we? And he asks, say perhaps a yes or no answer or not. Do we need to eventually disincentivize car use? I mean, even electric cars have their drawbacks. What do you think about?
David, I think that we won't have to. There is no amount of pavement that we can create in your county that's going to handle the commute traffic in the future. And when you're wall-to-wall traffic and you can't get down the street anymore, that's called terminal gridlock. When you're at that point, then that's a disincentive. And you're going to be out there hoping you have the train at that time.
We're getting close to that. What's it called? Terminal?
Terminal gridlock. It occurred in Beijing about 10 years ago.
Right. We remember we enjoyed a series of transit speakers in 2018. Jarrett Walker was one of them, and he, you know, he noted what seems obvious now, that the easier you make something, the more people will use it. So this idea of adding lanes may make things better for a short period of time until the same number, you know, more people taking more trips until you're back where you started. That idea of induced demand, right? Induced traffic. Terminal gridlock. I'm looking for any other questions. If anyone has anything, feel free to type something into the chat, and if not, if you have some closing statements, Rod, and of course I want you to stick around and talk more with Christina.
I will want to listen to Christina's presentation, but let me offer one last thought for you.
Yeah, please.
By 2030 or somewhere around that point, if we don't make the changes that we're told by science we must make, our beautiful children, who are young adults by that time, are going to come and look us in the eye as they realize their futures are limited, and that their children are going to have a terrible time. They're going to look us in the eye and they're going to say, Mama, Papa, did you do everything you could possibly do when there was still time? Well, I'm going to say yes. What will you say?
Wow. Well, there you go. Thank you. We'll be sure to stay, and Christina, if you're ready. Oh, let me see. Somebody had a question on housing. I'm going to take one more question from Mark Johannesson. And Mark, you're my co-chair. Go ahead and unmute if you want to vocalize your question.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rod. Great presentation.
Good to see you again, Mark.
Same here. As a former city council person myself, I've dealt a lot in housing and how to produce housing. And one of the main problems I see with this initiative is to take rail out of planning in general. So we basically have one high density transit line, which is Highway 1 with limited expansion. Have you dealt with housing in your term on council? And can you say anything about what rail can do to promote affordable housing?
Mark, it's a very, very good point. Highways cause urban sprawl. And the reason is because you can then put an off-ramp anywhere you want, and you can extend the roads back into the countryside as far as you want, and you can build houses all around, or fed by those roads, theoretically getting access through the roads. Of course, because you've scattered it out like that, it becomes unserviceable and a burden to the rest of the population, because you can't get sanitation to them. The police, fire, libraries, schools become very, very low density, and there's no tax base for it. That's what's called low density urban sprawl. That's what Santa Clara County used to be known for. We stopped that. We stopped any development outside the urban areas, and now the focus is building on top of the train stations. So when you have a train station and a parking lot, over the top of the train station and parking lot, you put a podium and maybe 10, 20 stories of apartments and condominiums on top of the train station. So you don't lose open space. You don't intrude into your last watershed land. And you encourage people to be force-fed into the transit system because they're going to be finding a job on the other end of the transit system someplace. Remember that if you save that rail line, you can get on the rail line in Santa Cruz, take it over to Gilroy, hop on the Caltrain system, or maybe even start the Caltrain in Santa Cruz, maybe a couple of Caltrains in Santa Cruz, and have it come up over into Gilroy, and then right on down the tracks to the Diridon station in Silicon Valley, and have them take a feeder system. Another 10 to 15, 20 minutes from there, bus, light rail, commuter rail, taxi, whatever they want to, into their jobs. And our progressive industrial leaders have already said they're going to subsidize those tickets. They're going to support mass transportation. They already do in some cases. So it works. it works like the rest of the world is making it work. And we become good citizens to the world in the process by being sustainable.
Thank you, Rod. And thanks for the question, Mark. And forgive me for missing it earlier. I'm trying to keep my eye on the chat here. So stick around, everyone, and feel free to ask questions of Rod and of Christina, who I'm happy to introduce, and I'm so grateful because your what's going on in Monterey is so helpful to our region, to our future. And we're not an island here in Santa Cruz County. We're connected to the rest of the state and the rest of the nation. And you guys have been really moving forward with a lot of great projects. So Christina, welcome, and feel free to say a few words about yourself, and then tell me when to start sharing your slides. You had 9 slides with maps and great stuff. So take it away, Christina. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. Thank you. Thank you, Rod. Rod, you're a really tough act to follow. I knew this was going to happen to me too. So Rod and I go way back. Like he said, it was almost a lifetime ago. I graduated in 2007 from his Mineta Transportation Institute, studied under him for a master's in transportation management. And that was a great experience. It does feel like it was a million years ago, but I'm still working on the same project. So these projects take a long time. My name is Christina Watson. I'm now the TMC Director of Planning. I started at TMC in 2001 as a planner and just stayed at it and kept at it. And it really takes some serious dedication and persistence to get projects like this built. So I think I can share my own screen, except it says disabled participant screen sharing.
You're welcome to. Let me just make sure. I think you're able to. Just check. If you can, take it away. Do it.
It says host disabled participant.
Oh, no, I'm changing that. Try it again.
Okay.
I have the power. Okay.
So I have a whole bunch of maps, as Barry mentioned. That's kind of my thing. I kind of love maps. Yeah. So are you able to see my screen?
There, perfect.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to be talking about all of the different rail projects that we have going on in Monterey County. And I'm happy if somebody wants to stop me on a slide to talk and ask questions, or I can go through my whole presentation. We can go backwards to look at maps afterwards if you prefer. So I'm going to start with kind of a bigger picture of the region with the 2018 State Rail Plan, which the state is currently working to update for the 2022 adoption, but this is still the one that's current in terms of what's been adopted. The other one is still just in draft form. And so the vision in 2018 for this year, 2022, is reflected on this map. It shows in pale blue intercity rail, so that would be Capital Corridor trains, and this is the San Joaquin trains. The dark green is called regional rail. So this line here is the Caltrain corridor from San Francisco to San Jose. The paler green is less frequent regional rail, and the palest green is even less frequent regional rail. So this shows the service that currently goes to Gilroy, continuing down to Salinas. That is not currently happening. So I will get to that when I get to that project. But that was the vision. The orange is inner city bus routes that connect in at rail hub stations. So that was the 2022 vision. The 2027 vision, 5 years later, includes high-speed rail. So that's the red line. And the rest of the colors are just a little bit darker because the frequency of service is assumed to be more frequent. You'll see that there's a blue line now extending south from Salinas, and that assumes a new service on the coastline to complement the Amtrak Coast Starlight that currently runs from LA to Seattle with 1 round trip per day. And this map reflects an increase in service on that corridor with an intercity train that could either be Capital Corridor extended south to San Luis Obispo, or the Los Angeles, San Diego, San Luis Obispo train called the Surfliner extended northward to Gilroy or San Jose. That was the vision here with that blue line. And then the 2040 vision, which is the big picture vision, that's where you see the new green line between Santa Cruz and Monterey. So that would be an around the bay service that was first envisioned back in the 1990s when my now retired boss, Debbie Hale, who most of you probably know really well, worked at the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission. So that story has been around for quite some time. And that is what is included in the 2040 vision because of all the steps that it would take to get there. Yeah. So looking for a moment at the entire Coast Rail corridor from San Francisco to LA, this corridor is mostly in private ownership by Union Pacific. Caltrain owns the corridor between San Francisco and San Jose. And I think the end of UP ownership is down here at Moore Park. So UP owns from Moore Park to San Jose. And so this is the corridor that I am working with a whole bunch of other coastal agencies, including the RTC, to get another coast rail line service for passengers, a new through train that would complement the Coast Starlight. It would fill a gap in Coast Rail service that currently is only served by the Coast Starlight, and it's not a commuter service. It's a long distance. It's a beautiful trip, but you got to have time. This is about the journey, not the destination on the Coast Daylight, the Coast Starlight. Mm-hmm. So the vision for this one is that would it be more economical and more expeditious than the current service on the line. The next one, focusing in a little bit closer to our area here. This map shows all the different services that currently exist in the Bay Area and that are planned. So we have the Caltrain line that goes from San Francisco to San Jose with over 100 trains a day now. 3 of those now go south to Gilroy. Their service was scaled back significantly during the pandemic, but they have scaled back up. Riders are returning, and they have the electrification project, which I saw there was a comment in the comments about the electrification project that is well underway. It's fully funded. It has a big federal grant, as well as a lot of state money on that project, and that is under construction to electrify the service. They can only electrify their line now. So that is from San Francisco to San Jose that's being electrified. South of San Jose, that would be subject to the high-speed rail project getting funding to be built. And they are looking at having that service then once the high-speed rail line builds their line between San Jose and Gilroy, the Caltrain could then move over to operate on the high-speed rail electrified corridor. But in the meantime, they still need to have some diesel trains that continue southward out of San Jose. And those are the trains that we are looking to extend down to Salinas. So we have fully funded the blue parts of this project. We have already constructed the improvements at the Salinas train station that are the highway side of the project, the circulation elements, an extension of Lincoln Avenue to have signalized access. And we are at 90% plan specifications and estimates for the rail side of the project on Union Pacific tracks between at Salinas to build a layover facility for the trains. And between Salinas and Gilroy, at Gilroy, we need to connect the tracks to through the mainline track because Gilroy is the end of the line for Caltrain, and Caltrain couldn't continue south today if they wanted to. So we need to build those improvements to make that possible. And then I know in the future, our next priority, and this is of the most interest to this group, I think, is the Pajaro-Watsonville station. So we applied for a TIRCIP grant, and TIRCIP stands for Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. So that's a state grant that we applied for. We should hear next month if we got it. That would fund the early phases of the project. So bring us through the design, update our environmental. We have done environmental on the station, but with the new concept of having around the bay service also be going through there, the design will have to adapt a little bit to make that possible. Even if we don't build for that in the near term, we still need to environmentally clear that. Mm-hmm. And so that would be part of the grant. Another part of the grant would be transit connectivity. So we worked with our partners at Santa Cruz Metro and Monterey Salinas Transit to ensure that those buses would stop at the Pajaro station, and what would it take to make sure that they could do that. So that'll be part of our design, part of our environmental clearance, and it's part of the funding. And then the third element of the grant application is the trail segment that goes from the Pajaro River Bridge to the station itself, along the rail corridor, and then onto Salinas Road to the station. So we're fingers crossed that we get that grant, because then we can make significant progress on that station and get it ready and poised to apply for federal funds or more state funding. And then the third element of this project is the Castroville station, which is the linkage to the Monterey branch line. So very critical for us to be able to envision that round the bay service to have a station at Castroville. So those stations do not currently exist. There are no stations there today. They did exist in the past. They were removed and demolished in the 70s, I think, maybe even not quite that long ago. But long enough ago that no train has stopped at those stations in quite a long time. But part of our project is to reestablish those stations and make that possible. And then my next slide talks a little bit more about the Monterey branch line. It's in public ownership, 16 miles from Castroville to Monterey. And in 2009, the TMC board, the Transportation Agency for Monterey County Board, adopted a light rail as a locally preferred alternative, but did not get funding or support from the federal government for that alternative at that time. So it's been deferred until we secure funding for that. And in the meantime, we have been working with our partners at Monterey Salinas Transit to look at an interim service that we can use the corridor for a bus rapid transit line nicknamed the SURF project. Doesn't actually stand for anything, but we capitalize it anyway. That would go between Marina and Sand City on the Monterey branch line corridor, not taking away the rails, just going, because we have a 100-foot wide right of way, there's room for a bus road. And that would bypass the congestion on Highway 1. I don't think we're quite at terminal gridlock on Highway 1, but on some very busy weekends, it does look like that. Yeah. And then that is my whole presentation, and there's more resources on our website, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Christina. And I'm looking for questions. I know somebody had, one of my friends had asked about the green line across the mid-peninsula, but I think that was answered by another friend. The Dumbarton Rail crossing exists up in the bay in the 2040 vision, I guess it is. I have a question. While I'm looking for questions, I'm going to ask a question. When I look at your slides and you mentioned that you had the preferred alternative 2009 light rail alternative, and thankfully you have your railroad. Most of the tracks are still in place. We similarly have a locally preferred alternative, which is electric light rail for our branch line, and but for a tie vote, as you are probably aware of, the commissioner's 6-6, we might be looking for, to do more planning with that. Is your locally preferred alternative light rail 2009 project something that is that you would that's like, does it have a shelf life, or does it stay? It's that just remain until some other alternative happens?
Yeah, well, right. So the locally preferred alternative was adopted 13 years ago now.
Yeah.
We have some of the same policymakers are still on our board. Some of them, quite a few of them, actually. We tend to have sort of long, very committed political activity here in Monterey County for whatever reason. So they remember that. They remember that they made that commitment back in 2009, but for funding, we would have been moving forward with that. The compromise of working with MST to build bus rapid transit on the corridor on a small portion of the corridor, it's not even half the corridor length, is to show that there's demand for transit, because that was the question that we got from Federal Transit Administration. First of all is prove it. Like, we don't really see the same demand, because they're used to dealing with major metropolitan cities, New York, Washington, DC, San Francisco, LA. That's what FTA is comfortable with. So a small area like ours, they see it as a very risky investment of federal funding. Yeah. So we have to substantiate all of our assertions that we would have people riding this train, and show that by having a bus corridor that is right there on the corridor, on the rail line. Yeah. And if we have a lot of riders on that bus corridor, that will help to make the case, as they say, for the Federal Transit Administration to get funding. And the other option, of course, is to seek state funding, assuming that that is the direction that the state continues to go with their climate action plan for transportation investments and other things that are pointing towards a lot more intensive rail and transit investments. So we do think that this is still a project that it's still in our regional transportation plan. It's still in the 3-county metropolitan transportation plan. It's just not funded at the moment. Yeah. What kind of vehicle? We were always agnostic about that in our plans, because technology for rail vehicles was already changing at that point. Yeah. A lot of rail providers were looking towards having electric, hybrid electric, hydrogen, and biofuels was already the talk of the town back in 2009. So, and that obviously has accelerated. So we didn't commit to any particular kind of vehicle at the time.
Excellent, thank you. A couple of questions have popped up. One is another friend of mine wonders, is the condition of the Salinas River Bridge of concern, or something that you're working on, and how big an obstacle is that? And yeah, go ahead and with that one.
Yeah, so that was studied under when we were preparing to do an environmental document that never got completed for that corridor. We did a very intensive study about just that bridge. Yeah. It would need to be thoroughly replaced. It is rusting. It is in need of complete overhaul. So it would be the most expensive element of the project. So what the project proposal was when we were moving through that process was to start with the corridor that is fully intact from Monterey to Marina, which is where most of the travel is happening anyway. Right. And that would be phase 1 of the project. And then phase 2 would be the Salinas River Bridge. And then phase 3 would be to connect to Castroville. So we were phasing it out as what the FTA calls minimum operable segments. Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yeah, so that was a good question.
Another good one. They're all good. Another good one. What lessons can Santa Cruz learn from TAMC's efforts of funding a locally preferred alternative? And
I mean, we both share similar lessons, I think. We're all knowing that these projects take a long time. It takes a lot of people who are really passionate about it to make these projects happen and get them funded. You need a champion, a political champion for the project. Right. Dirajan would know more about that than I do, about how to get a political champion for your project. But you know, there's always ups and downs, and if you just keep incrementally planning towards some kind of success, which is, you know, I didn't even go into all the evolutionary ups and downs with the Rail to Salinas project that, you know, has been in the works for a very long time. And there's a reason why we deferred construction of Pajaro and Castroville, and that's because we had state support, we had state money, and we said, what can we build with the amount of money we do have? And so we scaled it back to be what we're doing now. And even that, we still had to value engineer.
Good. Yeah.
Which is shorthand for cost cutting.
Save money. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I have another question I'll ask, and then I have a question of my own. The how far, this one is, and I'm always wondering too, how far south into Monterey does TAMC expect, when you get to that point of restoring service on the rails, how far do you imagine this, where would the southern terminus be? And what about the popular path that now occupies where the trail has actually taken over where the tracks have been removed for the trail?
Yeah. So like I said, the corridor is 100 feet wide. So there's plenty of room for train and multiple trails if you want.
Sure.
Yeah, so there's that. The issue of where it stops in Monterey is still TBD. Mm-hmm. Our documents assume that it goes into downtown Monterey, like the Portola Plaza, Fisherman's Wharf. It might not do that.
Right.
It might stop short of there. It all depends on where the political will is at the time that we get funding for the project. Uh-huh. So who knows?
What's a reason? What do you think is a reasonable? It's not going to go all the way to where it once did pass.
Well, no, because it once went all the way to Pebble Beach.
Right. And
No, it won't go to Pebble Beach. The tracks have been taken out from Monterey through Pacific Grove and to Pebble Beach. So those tracks don't exist anymore. The tracks do exist to Monterey though. Yeah. You can actually, they're underneath the path only in some places. There are lots of places you go on your path and you're right next to the tracks and you can see the tracks there. They're still there. But that doesn't mean that's where the train has to go. The train can go on the road. If it's a light rail, it can act like a bus and just be on the road, just like it does in San Jose and lots of other towns.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I love that myself.
I feel like I missed an element of your question. I'm sorry.
Oh, I think you covered it. It was like how far, what's a reasonable distance in southern terminus? And I think you answered that. You can go as
it's far. A balance. Yeah, it's a balance between ridership and political will. Because if they say, oh, well, you have to stop at Seaside, and we do a ridership analysis and say people want to go to Monterey, like stopping in Seaside, what are they going to do in Seaside other than get a cab?
Right, to go the rest of the way.
Get a rental bike or whatever. But yeah, so you have to make that calculation when you get to the point of
well, you have a harder time of it than we do because we have the tracks sitting right there and we just need to use them or upgrade them. I'm going to ask you,
a little more complicated than ours, I have to say.
Oh yeah. Say again.
Just a little bit more complicated.
Just a little bit. I remember, and you can refresh our memory, but I remember some discussion at a presentation during probably a rail policy committee meeting when you learned that there was a tie vote. I think it must have been last year in April, after the April vote. And doesn't Monterey's plans for the Salinas to Gilroy extension, your ridership numbers, your passenger numbers, weren't some of those numbers relying on or hoping for a certain number of passengers boarding from Santa Cruz from the branch line at Pajaro Station?
Well, they do. Yeah, they do in terms of the Pajaro Station, but it doesn't necessarily rely on rail providing those passengers. Uh-huh. The Pajaro Station does assume that there will be quite a few people, like 80% of our ridership is estimated to come from Santa Cruz County, but that could mean somebody walking across the Watsonville Bridge from their house. That's still coming from Santa Cruz County.
Okay. That's an interesting figure, though. 80% of passengers there being not for that entire service.
Pajaro's pretty tiny little village there.
No, of course, but people coming down from Santa Cruz County to board at Watsonville Station, Pajaro. Thank you. I got another question. It's is there a Monterey County analog to our Santa Cruz quote Greenway? And he means Are there opponents to your projects like we have here?
Well, there's no opposition that I know of to the Salinas Rail project, but that's different, right? I think whoever the person who asked that question is probably meant the Monterey Branch Line project. When we were going through the environmental process and doing a huge amount of public outreach and having public meetings, remember when we used to do that?
Yeah.
All over the place. The most concern was voiced about the windows on the Bay Park, which is right next to a 6-lane Del Monte Avenue. So they were really worried that some people would get run over by the train going down Del Monte Avenue. And it's one of those things where it's like, well, perception is reality. So we got to show what that would look like. What would it look like for a light rail train to go down Del Monte Avenue next to the buses and the trucks and the whatever else is happening on Del Monte Avenue? And so we did a little video, what do they call that? Visualization, computer animated, whatever, to show what it would look like to see that it really isn't that big of a change from having the kind of traffic we have today. And in fact, if we have all these people on the train instead of in their cars, it would actually be safer. But that's, it's just something where once people get this idea in their head that it's gonna, kill their dogs and children, they can't be unconvinced about that. It's an unwinnable argument.
Yeah.
But we didn't, other than that, we didn't have that kind of, it was really focused on that particular part, that particular segment. It wasn't about the entire project. If you go way, way, way back, in like my early years at the agency, there was a mayor in the city of Marina who said that there would be a train going through her town over her dead body. Unfortunately, since then, we have lost that particular mayor. So morbid, but she was very adamantly opposed to it. But she was one individual, and the rest of the city did not agree with her. She did not keep her office, but it wasn't necessarily because of that project. So I'm just sort of going through like in my head about what opposition the project has faced, and that's what I come up with.
Well, I think we enjoy a tremendous amount of support here, and we look to you all. TAMC had a survey that showed significant support regionally for rail.
Yes.
We have had the RTC has conducted other studies, and really, I think that there's a very loud minority, a very loud and well-financed campaign with this Measure D. I thought of another question for you though. What impact, and this could go to Rod too, what impact, every county has a general plan. And in our general plan is mentioned, for example, working with TAMC for the Around the Bay. I think that's a specific section in our circulation, part of our general plan. And without trying to put you in a political spot, I think it's a question that could have an objective answer. What impact would it have on Monterey's transportation system if a measure were passed that erased every mention of rail from the general plan? And would that help or hurt or seriously? If it's not, unless it's an obvious question, but that's what we're facing up here. How important is a general plan and including regional planning language for rail, for example?
You're asking me this?
I am, and then I'm going to let Rod take it too.
I think I'll just let Rod take it if he wants.
Okay, let's let Rod take it. I don't blame you. That's why I kind of was hoping, giving you an out. Rod, this is what we're facing.
Well, I heard your question, Barry.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to be pulled away in just a minute.
Okay.
But it's obvious that to eliminate any of the alternatives in a general plan, it would be devastating. It's limiting your future, and I think it just would not be the right thing to do. In fact, your giants of your former boards of supervisors led by Fred Keeley carefully studied this upside down, backwards, with millions of dollars worth of consulting fees. And they came to the conclusion that you needed that rail line.
Yeah.
And that's why the general plan was modified to include the rail line in the general plan. And to see that now discarded without significant study, purely on a political vote stimulated by one member of the Board of Supervisors, is just unconscionable. And it's obviously self-serving to the wealthy people along the right-of-way and by folks who have vested interest in automobiles. And the rest of us need to stand up and reject that.
Thank you. I'm going to add, just 2 days ago, speaking of leadership and heroes of our movement, I believe it was on Monday or Tuesday that we saw a letter written jointly by the past 3 executive directors of our RTC, Linda Wilshusen, Pat Mullen, and Pat Tillin, and George Dondero, who came out with a very, very articulate set of reasons that we need to defeat Measure D and, continue with these decades of plans. And so with that, Rod and Christina, thank you so much for coming to our club and sharing the history, the plans, the importance of climate change, and the way that transportation fits into whether we make it out of here alive or not. And really, I just want to thank both of you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. It was an honor to be associated with Christina.
Yeah,
honor to be associated with you, Rod.
Yeah, thank you both for coming, and
good luck to you.
Thank you indeed.